اوكي بسم الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين، سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا، اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك، آمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, good to be back home. Alhamdulillah. Um, I was away for a few weeks. Alhamdulillah, on Umrah with some many Mizan students. Alhamdulillah, we had a good Umrah experience. Make dua the first of many, inshallah ta'ala. And then after that, I went to Turkiye for a few weeks, traveling around and road tripping a bit with the family. Alhamdulillah. I thought today, Maulana Yasin is ill today, so he was unable to make it for today. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to speak a bit, not about the tourist side that you can get somewhere else, inshallah ta'ala, but more some reflections on the history of Turkey and where it is at now, and what we can gain from it in terms of Muslims in Cape Town and understanding Islam. I think that it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of revival in the interest in the Ottoman Empire because of the Ertugrul series. And it's amazing how much one TV series can impact the collective conscious of a people. Um, and one finds that stories impact nations more than anything else. Stories impact nations, and therefore the Quran is full of stories. And when you look at Western media, the dominant force are the stories, are the movies, are the series, are the little clips that tell stories, because stories impact how you view the world. It impacts how you think. And one thing to consider is what stories are we watching, and what stories are we reading, and what stories are we exposing our children to, because this has an impact. And so the story that we've been watching, or someone has been watching, it has an impact. And so what we find that in Islamic history, uh, the major Khilafah before the Ottomans were the Abbasids, and the Abbasids were in Baghdad. There were obviously Seljuks as well before them as well, but the really major Khilafah were the Abbasids, and before them was the Umayyad dynasty. And what happened to the Abbasid Khilafah? What caused their fall? What major event? Probably the most devastating event in the history of Islam, the Mongol invasion. The Mongol, because they were headquartered in Baghdad, and the Mongol invasion sweeps Baghdad, the headquarters, and it was an invasion unlike any other invasion in the history of Islam. It was brutal, and it upset the entire Muslim ummah. And therefore, if you look at the map, uh, if you look at the map, um, you find that the Muslim Ummah then, here's Baghdad here, and here's Turkey, that the Muslim Ummah then flees because the invasion's coming here from the east. So the Muslim Ummah then flees towards the west, and they start settling more in Egypt, in parts of Sham as well. They start settling, and obviously in this area as well, in Anatolia. At the time it was called Anatolia. And from there you have the rise of the Ottoman Empire, starting with the now famous Kai tribe, uh, was initially led by Ertugrul Ghazi, and then later by Usman. And so what happens is that this was in the year, this was in the 15th century, in the 1400s. Um, one finds here that there's a little town called Sout, which is not even on the map here because it's so small. Um, but it's just, uh, if here is Bursa here, it is about, yeah, it's about It's about 120 kilometers outside Bursa. So in this area here, um, Ertugrul lives and Usman lives. They actually both died there as well. They both died there as well. And the intention of Usman, he kind of unites some of the tribes, and his intention then in the 1500s is to conquer the capital of that time. The capital of that time was actually Bursa, and so he then goes and then he has his intention, but then his son Orhan Ghazi, he is actually the conqueror. So he then conquers Bursa, and if you go there now, you'll find the grave of Orhan Ghazi there, and then they actually move the grave of Usman from Saud to Bursa. They moved the grave there. So Orhan and Usman, Ertugrul is still buried here in Saud. Uh, Usman and Orhan are buried in Bursa. So Bursa becomes, and when they conquer Bursa, they have a capital. So it was like a very small village. They have like a capital. And so then they have the semblance of a nation. Because they were previous just like tribes. They become unified. They conquer a capital. They have some infrastructure. They have some buildings. And now they have the semblance of a of a nation. And then and this happens. I was trying to get some of the history right here. This happens. Sorry, this happens in the. No, sorry, I made a mistake here. This happens in the 1400s. They say in Usman died in 1324, and the capital was established in 1326. So the 1400s, it was it was established. And then I think part of the reflection also is that when one travels, and generally I always travel to Muslim countries, I mean largely, um, because one also seeks connection. One seeks connection to the ummah, and one seeks connection to the history of the ummah. And even though one might be having a holiday, there's still connection as well, and the significance in the journey. And so this becomes the first capital of the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman, obviously Usmani, named after Uthman, the father of Oran. Even though Oran is actually the conqueror, he's actually the first major conqueror. Really, it becomes known after his father. And then what happens is, what is the major conquers next is going to be Constantinople. So what happened is that the Roman Catholic Church splits into the Western Roman Empire. That's a few hundred years before this, and into the Eastern Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire is called the Byzantines. They call the Byzantines, and their headquarters is called Constantinople, named after who? Constantine, who's famous for doing what? No, so he is the pagan leader, because remember, Christianity is born into Roman paganism. Remember, Christianity is born into Roman, because the Romans are pagans. They're born into Roman paganism. And then Constantine is the first ruler to become Christian. So he becomes Christian, and in his time, yes, they have the Council of Nicaea, and they have the establishment of the Trinity, and this becomes the headquarters of the Christian Empire, of the Eastern Christian Empire, the Byzantines. It's called Constantinople. It's called that for many, many years. Constantinia in Arabic it's called. And so now the Muslims now are, not the Muslims, the Ottomans now are based in Bursa. And then there's a famous hadith about Constantinople. The Prophet ﷺ says, "La tuftahunna Constantinia," that you will definitely conquer Constantinople. And he says, فَنِعْمَ الْأَمِيرُ أَمِيرُهَا. What a wonderful leader its leader is. فَنِعْمَ الْجَيْشِ ذَلِكَ الْجَيْشِ. And what a wonderful army that army is. This was said when? In the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he passes away. And in the time of the Sahaba and Tabi'een, they tried to conquer Constantinople. In their time now, because we're going back now. We're going back now in history, 8th century now. We're going back. Because who you find there is, you find that they tried to, but they say that Constantinople was a very well fortified city. I was reading that they had three defensive walls, three separate defensive walls, and the inner wall was the largest wall. It was 5 meters thick. So if you think about like a 5 meter wall of three walls, it's a very difficult city to conquer. And the one side, obviously, there's the golden wall or the Bosphorus, the river there, and it was fortified. And so you have a famous Sahabi who's buried there. His name is Abu Ayyub al Ansari. He's the same Sahabi the Prophet ﷺ lived with in Medina. In fact, if you face Medina's Haram from the front and you see the green dome there, there's a small little section there where they do the Janazah Salah. And on the right hand corner was his house actually. The Janazah Salah that was actually the right hand corner of his house. And so when the camel went to the masjid, Abu Ayyub took the saddle of the camel. And then the Prophet said a man must be with his saddle. And then he went to stay with Abu Ayyub al Ansari. And he fights in all the battles. He fights in Badr, in Uhud. He fights in all the battles. And in his old age, he joins the uh, the battle in terms of trying to conquer Constantinople. And he actually dies there. He dies there, and he makes a request that he must be buried there on the at the walls, as if he's like a shahada that he died uh, trying to conquer. So that's probably my favorite place in all of Turkey is to go to his masjid and his maqam there. It's a beautiful feeling there, and he is buried there. Now it's obviously part of the city. By the time it would have been outside the city, but now it's obviously part of the city. So this idea of the conquest of Constantinople had long been in the Muslim psyche, had long been in the Muslim psyche. And so now when we in the 1400s, they conquer Bursa. But obviously previously to the 1400s were what? Were all the Crusades. All the Crusades. So the Crusaders came from Europe. They went through Constantinople to collect some more army, some more soldiers, and they moved down. So this is after the years of the Crusade. Meaning what? There's a long-standing enmity between the Byzantines and between the between the Muslims. And then from the offspring of Orhan Ghazi and Usman Ghazi comes Muhammad Muhammad al-Fatih, the famous they call him Mehmet, but this Muhammad al-Fatih is his name. Al-Fatih means what? What does Fatah mean? To open or to conquer, like Surah Fatih, the conquest. So Al-Fatih is ismul fa'il. Al-Fatih is ismul fa'il. So he's Muhammad the conqueror. So he actually becomes the Khalifa twice. Not the Khalifa, he becomes Sultan. When the Khalifa comes, the Sultans. So he becomes the ruler twice. The first time was his father got tired of becoming of being the ruler. So his father said, "Okay, you become the ruler." By that time, he was 12 years old. so, so, so he was there, and his father went to retire somewhere. But then some battles started rising, and then he told his father, if you're the Sultan, you must come back and defend. And if I'm the Sultan, I command you to come back and lead the army." And then his father comes back, basically takes his seat, and then he goes and he leaves the capital and he goes for his education. He learns multiple languages. He learns about the arts. He learns about Islam as well, and he he has a sheikh as well, um, and the sheikh instills with him the idea that he should attempt to conquer Constantinople. And then he goes eventually, and then when his father dies, he's 19 years old. So when he's 19, he becomes the Khalifa not the Khalifa, the Sultan for a second time. And then he decides to go and to conquer Constantinople. He builds a huge fleet, I think about 300 ships, and he has tens of thousands of people, and he goes and he marches to Constantinople. There's a series there on Netflix that has the rise of what they call again, something of the Ottomans or something like that. But it's like a documentary type series. It's quite an interesting series to watch to see the rise. So if you go to if you go to the map here, this area here is modern day Istanbul. Um, Maybe I should make it into a satellite view. So modern day Istanbul, and then one finds that there is this Bosphorus River which divides the city.
Maaf Mulana. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear us? Mulana,
Islam,
we can't
okay.
see your map.
Oh, you can't see the map.
No.
Allah, may Allah give us all sight, inshallah ta'ala. Bismillah. Is the sight there? No. So Bismillah. You should be able to see it
Jazakallah.
now.
Yes.
Barakallah. So if you look at modern day Istanbul, it has a river between it, and so this is actually literally like the meeting of two continents. They call this side here the Asian side, and this side they call the European side. And like to go across here is like a normal water taxi ferry. You take across there, so it's a city between two continents. But in terms of historically, um, this part here, and you can see the name is still there. Um, this part here is called Fatih. Can you see this part here? Fatih. Why? Because this here was the original Constantinople. This was the original Constantinople, not the whole thing. This was the original Constantinople. So this here is called Fatih. Generally, I always stay here when I go to Turkey. Um, it's the most Islamic area in Istanbul. In fact, there's one area here where there's Karshamba. It's Jami Ismail Aga. In that masjid there, there's one, people don't see this. There's one masjid there where everybody wears a thobe, a jubba, and a turban. The whole masjid for every salah. Like there's one area there where it's very like Islamically conservative. All the women are in niqab. All the men, doesn't matter what you are, you're a tailor, you wear full outfit, jubba, turban, everything. Um, so Fatih is for me the best place to stay. It's the most Islamic space and also has all the historical masjids there. Fatih is there, Yavuz is there, Sulaimaniya is there. So you don't get the like a very secular experience. Not much alcohol there, lots of Syrians there as well. So you find Arabic is more common there as well. You can speak a few words of Arabic, so some people understand you. So it's a different experience of Istanbul, um, as opposed to going to the Asian side, where you get a very kind of European experience. It's very different. So, so what happened was that he tried to conquer here. What happened was that they weren't actually able to penetrate the walls. They had cannons and they tried to penetrate the walls and they were unable to. And then they tried to pass the ships into this is called the Golden Horn here. They tried to pass the ships into the Golden Horn, but they were unable to. Why? Because there was a huge metal chain across it. So whenever a ship used to come, they used to pull up the metal chain, and then they would have obviously defensive ships here, and they used to have cannons, and they used to just blast it. The ship gets stuck, and then they just sink the ship. And so the siege was basically at like a stalemate because he's around the city and he's unable to come here and to and to cross over. So what he does, very interesting strategic move, is that he takes some of the lighter ships and under the cover secretly, he carries them over the land. He carries the ships like they put logs and they put oil in it and they pick up the ships and they slide it over about a kilometer of land around around the chain, and then they drop the ships beyond the chain. So when the Ottomans woke up, they saw all of these. Not Ottomans, the Byzantines woke up. They saw all of these Ottoman ships now beyond the chain, and they eventually then surrender the city. They surrender the city, and that is Muhammad al-Fatih. And at this age, he's 21 years old. So he's 21 years old at this time, and he then conquers uh, Constantinople, and he then declares it to be the capital. And then the biggest church in the world that time, they call Hagia Sophia, the Hagia Sophia. he converts it into a masjid. It's a massive building. It was the biggest church in until the 15th century, the biggest church in the world, and he converts it into a masjid. In fact, his conversion of it into the masjid, they still have the original text where it says this person must recite, he must get paid so many dirhams, and this person must clean, this person must do this. And then he says, may the one who changed it from masjid be cursed. Eventually, they changed it into a museum, but it's back into a masjid now again. I'll discuss a bit later about that history. And so Muhammad al-Fatih, he then conquers, and now they become a a significant force. So his conquest I mentioned was in 1453. So 1453, 15th century. And then he's the Sultan, but he's not the Khalifa. What's the difference? A Sultan is like a president, a regional or president of a people, a ruler of a people. Whereas the Khalifa is the ruler of all the Muslims. You know, get acknowledged as the Khalifa. So he's not the Khalifa because he doesn't control the Arabian lands. He doesn't control Northern Africa. He doesn't control the Haramain. He's just in the Anatolian area. He controls that. Um, but anyway, he does a number of conquests. Um, and then from his offspring, there's someone called Sultan Salim the First, Yavuz Sultan. So he is the one who actually then conquers um, the Arab lands. He conquers into the Haramain, he conquers North Africa as well. And so from his offspring, Yavuz Sultan is the first Khalifa, Sultan Salim. He's actually the first Khalifa, whereas they were previous that they were sultans. So then they became the Khilafah. So that was in 1517. So in 1517, 16th century, now the Ottoman Empire becomes the Khilafah, becomes the ruler. So 1500, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So they become the Khilafah for about how many years? For about 500 years. 500 years. So become the Khilafah. If you count some of the previous times when the Sultan would be 600 years, but after Yavuz is about 500 years that he becomes the Khilafah. They say that the Abbasid Khalifa at that time gave the keys to them of the Haramain, and they become in charge of it. And you can see if you go to the Haram, there's that like a brown arches in the Haram. That's actually from the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman architecture. It looks different from the rest of the Haram. The rest of the Haram is all like marble and grey and white. And this brown piece is actually from the Ottoman Empire. It's the traces of their rule. Then Yavuz has a famous son. His son's name is Suleiman. They call him Suleiman the Great. And he is uh, let's call him like that was the height of their power. That is, they call that the golden age of the Ottomans, with the son of Yavuz. So if you go today, uh, you'll find each of them have their own masajid. Like Muhammad al-Fatih has the Fatih Masjid, and he's buried there. And Yavuz Sultan has the Yavuz Sultan Masjid, and he's buried there. And Sulaiman has the Sulaimaniya Masjid, and he's buried there. And these masjids in their own, they are like they're tourist sites because of their spectacular nature and their beauty. You can Google them. They're just magnificent, beautiful buildings. So in visiting, knowing the history, um, it enriches the visit to know where you're at, just besides seeing a beautiful masjid. This was actually part of the story of the Muslim Ummah and the story of the Khilafah. And so Sultan Sulaiman, which was the Khalifa, he's called Kanuni. Kanun means what? Law. Because he established almost like this a singular Islamic law across the entire Ummah. And then you have a number of conquests, and you have a number of developments of architecture, of arts, of many things. And the Ottoman Empire was an empire of multiple people, meaning what? There were Christians, there were Jews, there were multiple faiths living within the Ottoman Empire. At the same time, what's happening in the 15, 1600 in Europe? Something significant is happening 15, 16, 17, 7. Renaissance one. What else? What else? Colonization. The colonial powers, 1600, especially 1700, they start conquering. They start conquering, and along with the Enlightenment, along with the Industrial Revolution, is that the European powers become very powerful. One of the things is that um, the ability to conquer is not equivalent to a moral superiority. The fact that the Europeans conquered most of the known world and colonized them, it's not a virtue. Conquest itself is not a virtue. Are you with me? It's not, it wouldn't be correct understand to say the Europeans conquered South America and Africa and the Muslims didn't. They were superior to us. Because their conquest was brutal. I mean, we're only seeing what's happening in Gaza now because documented. What happened in Gaza happened in many places. In many places, entire populations were slaughtered, were displaced. Many places. Many places in Africa and South America, in many places in the world, there was immense brutality by European forces. Immense genocides by European forces. These are documented. Um, and the point I want to make is that the rise of the European war machine that conquered most of the known world. In fact, they obviously conquered here in South Africa as well. They fought battles here, the British and the Dutch fought the British until we became it's 1909, 1910 we became an official unified colony of the British until our independence. But it's not a virtue that they did that, and I believe that um, Islam would never conquer in that way. When I say conquer in that way, I mean like where they massacre people, where they brutalize people, where they abuse people, where they dispossess people. When Sultan Fatih, Muhammad al-Fatih, when he conquers, he invites the populations into Islam. He invites the Christians, invites the Greeks, invites nations into it to practice, and they had the freedom of practice. And there's no place that people were more free than in the Muslim lands. Where they were free to practice. Whereas with the colonizers, what happens? They change your language. Why do Mozambicans speak Portuguese? Do you think they just stumbled upon, oh, let's change our whole language to Portuguese, and let's dump all our previous religions and we'll adopt. Like these were why do half of the South America speak Spanish? Like it's like a weird thing. It's a weird thing. Why are we all speaking English? Why am I speaking English to you now? You know what happened? We had our own languages before. These were all forced transitions. So whereas the Muslims conquered, the Muslims had a very inclusive, multicultural states. So the point I want to make was that the fact that the European nations became stronger, one has to investigate how they became stronger. And if those means are immoral, then they're immoral and they're not praiseworthy. And so, because sometimes there's this notion that um, that strength and advancement is by its nature a good thing. I believe that to be questionable. And I think that the more time passes, the more we're going to question our technology. The more we have drones fighting wars and robots fighting wars and remote warfare, the more we're going to question, is this something which is positive? Is it something which is praiseworthy? And is it something which is aspirational for the Muslims to aspire to? And I believe it not to be. I believe these to be immoral forms. I believe colonization to be obviously immoral as well. Anyway, the point being was that Europe became much stronger than the Ottomans. They became much stronger. Britain, France, Germany, through conquest, through industrialization, they become much stronger nations, whereas the Ottoman Empire didn't experience the same thing. They were mostly agrarian. Agrarian means they're mostly agricultural based, traditional agricultural based society. And eventually their power starts declining, relatively speaking to the rest. And as the power declines, there becomes this tension between the nature of the Khilafah, like the single ruler of the Muslims, versus should we move to a more parliamentary system, a constitutional system, this tension starts arising. And eventually there's some degree of a reform movement. And then probably the last, let's call it really Islamic Khalifa was Abdul Hamid the second. Abdul Hamid was he ruled for 3 decades. And they call him the pious Khilafah, the pious Khalifa. He was very Islamic, but eventually he was also, this was late 1800s. Eventually he was also overthrown in a sense, and a parliamentary system was implemented. This was in the late 1800s. And then, so they're becoming weaker. They're becoming weaker and also what's happening is because the Ottoman Empire is not Turkey. The Ottoman Empire is also North Africa. It's also the Arabian Peninsula. It's also Sham. It's massive. It becomes difficult to hold onto these nations. Why? Because they also have their own tendencies that they want to self-control, self-rule. So it becomes difficult to keep everything together and keep everything intact. And then eventually we come to the 1900s, the 20th century. What is the major event in the 20th century? Is World War One. World War One is the major event in the 20th century. So as World War One is approaching, the Ottomans approach the Allies. There's two forces. There's the Allies, which is the British and the French, eventually the Russians and the Americans as well. They're the Allied forces. And the other one are called I think they're called the Central Forces. Central Forces is going to be Germany, I think Poland as well. So initially, the Ottoman Empire approaches the British to ally with the British. The British actually refuse. Why? Two main reasons. They refuse to become allies. Why? Number one, the Ottoman Empire doesn't have a lot of military strength to offer. But number two, the British also wants the land that the Ottomans control. So you can't be the ally and take the land. You can't be the ally and take the land. So what happens is that the Ottomans then ally with the Germans in World War One. The Ottomans ally with the Germans. Eventually, World War One breaks out, and at the end of World War One, Germany loses. So what happens to all the Ottoman lands? What happens to modern day Lebanon, modern day Palestine, modern day Sham? It all falls under Allied rule, British rule, and French rule, especially. And this was in, I think, World War I ends 1918, but 1918. And then this effectively spells the end of Muslim control, because now European nations control, obviously colonization, they control like Algeria and so on, but now they control more of the Muslim lands. And then from there rises, from then, and then the Ottoman Empire is at its low now, because now it's lost the war, it's allied with Germany, it's lost its territories to all the to the Allied forces, and it's even Turkey itself was smaller as well. Turkey itself was smaller. And then from there, there's a military general, Kemal Ataturk. Mustafa Kemal was his name. Ataturk means the father of the Turks. That's different. It's like a title, but his name was Mustafa Kemal. He is a military leader, and what he does positively is that he starts fighting against the Allied forces in Turkey, and he drives out the Allied forces in Turkey. He like stands up to the imperial, because now they're taking all the land. You know, they're the victor. They're taking the land. They're taking control of the land, and he stands up to them, which was the one positive thing that he did. And then what he does, so in 1918 the war ends, and he's now fighting for the Turkish area. And then in 1923, he declares that we're no longer the Ottoman Empire. We're now a, we're now a nation state. We're now a nation state, and we're going to be called Turkey. And he, 1923, he founds the nation of Turkey. And his principles are two. His principles are nationalism and secularism. Nationalism means we're a nation state. We're no longer an Khalifa, leader of the Muslim world, none of those things. We're a nation now. That's what we are. And his second thing is secularism, meaning what? We have nothing to do with Islam. We have nothing to do with Islam. And not just um, there's two types of secularism. There's American secularism and there's French secularism. What's the difference between the two? No. So in American secularism and as African secularism, we have freedom of religion. In a French secularism, we have freedom from religion. You with me? So in our states, there's a relative, especially in South Africa, there's a freedom. You can be yourself. You can be your religious self. But he adopts the French secularism, which means we want to free society from religion. We want to take religion out of society. And so this becomes the case. And he establishes, in 1923, establishes the Turkish state. He chases out the Khilafah, exiles the Khalifa. And then in 1924, he then legally dissolves the Khilafah. 1924. How many years ago? Exactly 100 years ago, the Khilafah ends. We have a nikah here. No. Inshallah, we'll have to enjoy the nikah. I think they're opening Qur'an now, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll listen and hopefully it won't be a long nikah. We'll see how it goes. Inshallah ta'ala. Anyway, while they're busy, so then the Khilafah is officially ended. There's no more Khalifa anymore. Up until 100 years ago, which is a short time or a long time. And this is a short time. A short time ago, there was no nation states. In the same time, what happens is that what is happening there is that you get the Balfour Declaration 1918 that gives Palestine to the Zionists. After the British said what to the Arabs, stand with us, don't stand with the Ottomans, stand with us, and we'll give you the land. When they won the battle, they gave the land to the Zionists. That happened. And then obviously they took control of all the Muslim countries and they divided them up. Lebanon and Syria, Egypt, they divided them up amongst themselves. And this is actually where the Palestinian problem comes from. It comes from the Balfour Declaration that gave the land, didn't belong to them, to another group of people. Another group of people. I mean, it's a European problem that was pushed onto the Palestinian people. No. And so he then establishes the state of Turkey. And he adopts, there's a lot of debate about was he Muslim, wasn't he Muslim, all of those things. But he adopts and he promotes an aggressive secular policy. What he does is he bans men from wearing the fez and the turban. You can't wear fez, you can't wear turban. He changes the adhan from Arabic to Turkish. Masjids can only be attended by people who are over 60. You, What's the couple? Bismillah, inshallah. Okay, Bismillah, inshallah. Just a few more minutes and then we'll end, inshallah. So, on our history, we in the beginning of the 1900s, And Mustafa Kemal, he then establishes the state. And he makes the state aggressively secular. Aggressively secular means that the Quran recitation is banned. All madrasas are closed. All learning of Quran is also banned. The they even have the adhan in Turkish for a while as well. And I remember when I was there on a previous visit, we went to visit some of the madrasas, and some of the teachers there said that they had to stay like in a chamber for a year to learn Quran, not seeing the sun at all, because you had to learn in secret because it was illegal for you to learn the Quran. In fact, to this day, if you especially go to Fatih and you buy a jubba there, you'll find there's like inside of the jubba there's a small little loop here because they used to hide their turban and their fez inside of there. They still make it to the loop. They used to hide it in there and then they used to go to the masjid and put on and so on. So there was a great deal of secularization of the society. Even nikah changed as well. Nikah was done in the court. Um, and like a normal process, like do you take this man, do you take this woman, and then they sign you up for as a legal nikah. It became law. So it was legally enforced, and many ulama were killed also for standing up against it. Yes, there was definitely a pushback against it, but it was legally enforced. I'll come to that now, inshallah. So what happens um, is that they basically remove also the face was banned and eventually the hijab was also banned. You couldn't go to university with a hijab, you couldn't go into government building with a hijab. They even I think banned Hajj and Umrah for a while as well, but afterwards they allowed it again. But the idea was that Islam was the hindrance towards progress. They even banned Turkish music for a while because they wanted people to listen to Western music. So besides the Quran, they also banned Turkish music for a while, so they can listen to Western music. And the premise was that Islam is holding the society back. It's superstitious, it's unscientific, and we need to become westernized. We need to become westernized. On the positive side, they did become more industrial. There was more economic activity. There was development of infrastructure in the society. So those are some of the positives. But on a very strong and negative side was the decimation of Islam. Like Islam was even the original Turkish writing was in Arabic script, Uthmani script. It was banned completely, and they actually developed a um, the Turkish language in normal normal letters we used. So overnight, people were rendered illiterate. Imagine you had read all those books, you had studied all of that. Overnight, you were rendered illiterate now because we are having a new language with uh, new letters and so on. And so what you find in Turkey is that when you remove Islamic education and when you remove the ulama, even to this day, I was asking the one sheikh, so where do the imams of the masjid come from? So you were saying that the imams of the masjid go to an Islamic school, but the Islamic school has very low level education, like in a high school or Imam Hatib school, and then they'll go to do a university Islam degree, like university Islam is like very different from traditional Islam. Then they become the imams. So there isn't a very strong ulama foundation anymore. In the past, there were great scholars in the Ottoman Khilafah, but since the establishment of Turkey, there's very little uh, development of strong ulama in Turkey. Very very few, and it's visible on society. Like when I go to masjid in Turkey, I'll find one saf, two safs, maybe mostly old people, not very much young people. Um, And you find that what happened to society is that the society became split to those who were aggressively secular. And there's a strong movement to those who are aggressively secular. And there's a side which is more Islamist. They want to become more Islamist. And previously, the Islamists were on the rise with Erdogan, um, and the economy was doing well. But now the economy is tanking. I think inflation was like 70%, interest rates at 50%. Um, and now the secular party, they've won the local elections in Istanbul and Ankara. Um, so there's that tension. And so what you find in Turkey is that I'm concerned because there isn't a, like even with nikah, like the nikah is done like in the court. I don't know if they have like traditional nikah, like hijab, Kabul, witnesses like we witness now. But you go to the court and they say yes, yes, and then you are you are married. Um, so there's a very kind of secular atmosphere, and the concerning thing is that I don't know if they can recover from that. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. But when you take out a generation of transmission, it's hard to rectify that because you have to rebuild that from scratch. And also the disadvantage of the Turks is that they can't access the international media because they can't watch Arabic or English because they can't speak English or Arabic. So they can't draw Islam from Hamza Yusuf or Nu'man Ali Khan because there's nothing. They can't access the language, so they don't even have like access to the international community. So this is one of my concerns about what's happening in Turkey. There is obviously efforts to try to revive it, but without Islamic knowledge, it's difficult. The other difficulty with Turkey is that the way the argument is set up is incorrect. Because the argument is not like Islam versus progress. You with me? If we become more Islamic, we're going to become less progressive. Your dunya progress, whether you become an engineer or it has nothing to, Islam doesn't have an impedance to it. And I think this is prominent or present in the mind of the population. I mean, only recently the hijab became unbanned in universities. Only recently now nikah was re-allowed. Even to this day, um, the madrasas in Turkey are actually illegal. But the government is Islamist, so they overlook it. But legally, it's illegal for you to have a madrasa. Till this day, it's illegal because it's enshrined in the constitution, and they can't change it. And the architect of this was Kemal Ataturk, and it's illegal to insult him or criticize him. In fact, he's like Ataturk means the father of the nation. And it's like a weird thing because he's like very revered. You go to any shop, restaurant, you see his picture there, almost like a great reformer, but he's like completely anti-Islam. So it's like a weird psyche in the population where you have this affinity to this person who founded your republic, yet this person destroyed your Islam. Now, I don't think to accept that he wanted to be on par with the West. He wanted to make Turkey the great nation, like the West. And this was his objective. And to a large degree, he succeeded in developing Turkey. In terms of economically and industry, they've grown from agricultural societies. Lots of industry now has grown, but the expense was Islam. And I fear, and I've been thinking about this a lot because the thing we grapple with is, for example, we are living in this secular democracy, and we have our freedom of practice. What we struggle with is it okay with us when sin becomes a social virtue? Is it okay for us when something sinful not only becomes public, becomes a social virtue? You with me? And I think that's the difficulty where I think that for me is a difficult point to be at. Because when I think when people say Islam is limiting them, and Islamic society will limit what? It will limit the drinking of alcohol. It will limit premarital sex. It'll limit the vices. So when people say they want to secularize, do they mean that they want to move to a world where something which is religiously immoral becomes something not only accepted but something celebrated? And there was this interesting video I watched. The singer, the singer, she goes to, you can Google it. She goes Saudi Arabia, and then she stands on stage and she says, "I was born a Muslim, and things have opened up in Saudi. I've born a Muslim, and things have opened up, and now I'm free to shake my behind." In other words, she used. And then she shakes it in front of the whole crowd, and they cheer. Then she sings a song in Saudi Arabia, "Bow down to your goddess." In Saudi Arabia, right? Okay, Google it. Then she brings on two homosexuals onto the stage, and then they boo her. And for me, it tells me that the agenda is not secularism in terms of just we're all free to practice. The agenda is to make the vice a virtue, to make immorality, immodesty into a social norm. And I fear the same thing happening in Saudi Arabia. I fear it's slowly happening because that becomes the notion of progress. The notion of progress is the concert. The notion of progress are the sporting events. The notion of that's the notion of progress, not just industry and the normal stuff and scientific research. That becomes the notion of progress. And I'm concerned about that within the Muslim psyche. And I think that we in Cape Town, we like, I really think we're unique because we are not people who celebrate sin. The Muslims in Cape Town and South Africa don't generally celebrate sin. You with me? You don't have a strong call to let's all drink and let's all, like, there isn't that celebration of sin, but there is the feeling of complete freedom and integration, and you can do what you want. And there isn't a tension. There isn't a tension between your worldly existence and your Islamic identity. And I think it's something which is amiss in many places. Because there was one group also which I have exposure to in Turkey, which is like a very religious group, but they're ultra conservative. They're almost like on the other end of conservative. They're so conservative that the woman must, if she's alone, she must wear a hijab. She must sleep in a hijab. So that's like on the other end of conservatism. Now where you like, you must like ultra conservative, and you have the ultra secular, and you don't just have this balance, this balanced way. What's the question? Yeah, I think I mean when I was in Saudi now, our group, um I mean I couldn't walk around with a group and tell them about the Sirah. Like, I'm like walking around telling them, yeah, the Prophet he came here from Cuba and they went there and there's this tree, the Hadiqa, Bani Sa'ida. And every time I'm walking, they're stopping me. You're not allowed to walk, you're not allowed to talk, you're not allowed to have a group. Mamnu, mamnu, mamnu. Then we have a dhikr in our hotel. They stop us there also. They come, you can't have dhikr in the hotel. You can't mamnu, mamnu, mamnu. And it seems like they don't want that expression of Islam, that like communal expression, and it's very controlled. And so I think that I don't find a better space in the world where Islam meets modernity than Cape Town. And I may have traveled a fair bit. I don't find a better space in the world where Islam and the modern world lives in a some degree of healthy coexistence, except for in Cape Town. I think even Joburg and Durban is struggling more than Cape Town. But in Cape Town, I do find it, and I do find us to be a very religious community compared to the rest. And I believe us to be example for the world. Like I believe the Muslims. I think we do a very bad job of projecting ourselves. Like we know we're humble people. We don't want to. We're not into like lots of podcasts and like, okay, I've been a few, but I'm saying we're not, we don't have that like, hopefully not that celebrity culture and that projection. But I think it's also to the detriment of the world, is that people don't know. It's, even when Noman Ali Khan came here, he said like he didn't know that there's this type of Islam in Cape Town. He thought Majlis was Islam in South Africa. The Majlis is like some ultra conservative, hectic guy. He thought that was Islam. The people don't know about the Islam here, and when the scholars come here, they're amazed by it. And I think that we have a lot to offer. And the other difference that we have, which is a very big difference, is that we are not people who are outside of the Western society wondering about it. Like, I wonder how it will be for us to be free and to go to the beach and to go to a party and to, you can go, like it's open, you know what I mean? Like you can go, it's on your doorstep, you can have it, but we don't want it. Maybe in the young days you tried a few, it didn't work out. So like it's not something which is like we're longing for something else. It's with us. And I believe that the more you travel, the more you realize there obviously are other centers of Islam, which are maybe like Tarim and so, but those are like removed from the modern world. Those are very different types of centers. And I think that the centers of Islam are slowly being destroyed. Like the Ottoman Empire, we learned now about how it's been destroyed. Syria was a great center of Islam, being totally decimated. The Egyptians are they're a good center of Islam, but lots of political interference and lots of political interference in the views and the lives of the ulama. Saudi also lots of issues. So when one looks, you find almost there's a very few centers that are intact. And because we have this opportunity, we also have an amana. Meaning what? That if we don't hold this community strong, we will lose it. And I think that active preservation for me is a big thing that we have to think about, is that actively we have to maintain, because we are battling ideological battles, and with the political changes, we don't know what's going to come. There's been lots of interest in South Africa, lots of foreign money, lots of foreign interference. We don't know what's on the horizon, and one mustn't be complacent about it. And one could see, like within the Ottoman Empire, how a group of people can change an entire nation. And it's me one of the scariest things. Like one group of people can change an entire nation, can make them lose their deen, can make them disassociate. Um, and I think this is where we are at the moment. So it's beautiful to visit these places, but it's also good to take the lessons from them as well. No, no, the Syrians are not integrated. In fact, there's a strong lobby against foreigners. It's one of the political points. Like xenophobia, they have a similar xenophobic kind of. That's where it is. Many Syrians are actually left from there because of the difficulties, and there's very little interaction between. So the Syrians are amazing scholars. I mean, they're like really really amazing scholars, and they have some centers of learning, but the Turks don't go there. So the other Syrians go there, international students go there, but the Turks don't go to the Syrians. It's also in Arabic as well. It's in Arabic, so there isn't that cross pollination really between the Syrian and I was hoping there was, but it doesn't really exist. Um, as well, because there isn't also like a strong Islamic drive amongst the people. Yeah, in general, except for obviously the Kurdish. The Kurdish are on the east of Turkey, but they're not Turks. They're Kurdish. They're Shafi'is also. They're very strong and religious and so on. But they're not part of it, the part I'm talking about, the Turkish part basically. So inshallah. So the Nia inshallah one day is to hopefully take a group of people to Turkey and to travel around and to have some lessons there and speak about the history there and also have a good time with the family and all of those things. But the reflections are also important. And one comes back and one um, appreciates everything. Got the dhikr, you appreciate because no dhikr is there. Then you come to a class, you appreciate it because no class is there. I mean, it just doesn't exist really. There's not really like a community of people learning and thriving and identifying. It's not strong. It's stronger now than it was 10, 15 years ago because of the Islamic Party, but it's not strong. It's becoming, hopefully it becomes stronger, inshallah. I don't know where it's going to go. A lot of it depends on the political front. So those are some of the reflections on what's happening there. And that's also it was like you view the demise of the ummah because you see the relics. The masjid is like a relic. It's this huge, amazing building, like the most beautiful masjid I've ever seen in my life. These magnificent centers, the madrasas, all of those things. But they're effectively just full of tourists. And it's the living community is not strong. Um, Obviously, these are my initial observations. I may be wrong in certain centers, places, and all of those things, but these are just initial observations about the journey there and our responsibility. And the one sheikh, I spent some time with a Syrian scholar there. I'll end with this. He said that Allah has given us an opportunity because he was very surprised by the amount of ulama. Malta, you met Malta also. He was, in fact, anyway, he said he meets many scholars. Scholars, he hosts many scholars. He never met a scholar from Malta in his life before. Um, and he was very like impressed by the amount of scholarship and the amount of learning in Cape Town. But he says that if we don't use it, Allah will take it away and make it rise somewhere else. Like if we don't use this opportunity that we have and this facility that we have, what do we have? We have freedom to do anything. Dhikr, class, da'wah, social media, business. You have freedom to do anything. You also have the freedom of speech. You have the freedom to be critical against immorality, against corruption, against unethical behavior. You have the freedom to be, you have complete freedom of speech. Doesn't exist in many spaces. And number three is that we have a very intact Islamic legacy and understanding on which to base our identity and to build our society. We have generations of ulama here that have passed Islam down in its intact, and we have access, and we have a growing uh, ulama body that have access to more and more learning, and those things are the are the ingredients for a vibrant Islamic community, and we have to work hard, inshallah wa ta'ala. And you being in this class is part of working hard. You being here, this is what it's about. This is about the tradition. This is about the passing of the legacy. This being here is important. It's not something small, not something insignificant, but it's the most important thing to pass on this Islamic identity. Everything else is relatively inconsequential to this. So, Allah bless this ummah. And that's why the ummah has been weakened also because everything's been compromised. I mean, it took South Africa, this nation in the south of Africa, to stand up and go to the ICJ, whereas none of the other Muslim nations even could think of something as simple as that or have the courage to do anything like that. And to this day, there's just lip service from all the Muslim nations. There's no concrete action. Most of these nations have ties with Israel. They have military. They have economic trade with Israel. They have diplomatic relations with Israel. Even though whatever they speak this stuff to keep the population. It's almost like in many of these nations, the leaders will say something pro-Palestine but act against it. Why? Because they want to keep the population appeased. Like we said something, but they're doing all the deals now. Um, yeah, so this is where we're at. I was just reading this morning that the Saudi government gave Jared Kushner $2 billion into his company. They didn't give the Palestinians $2 billion. They gave some American guy $2 billion from the investment fund. So this is what is really happening behind the scenes. And Alhamdulillah, we should be grateful to Allah. And we should also be working hard and preserving. Bismillah ta'ala. Any questions? You ready for Turkey now? No, I mean it's a beautiful place. That like on the puzzle, it's a beautiful place. Natural beauty. The beaches are really. I went to Mediterranean. The Mediterranean coast is really amazing beaches, turquoise waters, clear everything. Safe society. Women walking out in the middle of the night alone. Very safe society. It's a good place to visit. Alhamdulillah. There's always been an Islamic. Uh, there's two groups: the secularists and the Islamists. And the Islamists have always been um, strong in term, but for them, like Islam is, it's almost like allow us to wear hijab. It's not like Islam is like, you know what I mean? Like people are deeply learned. It's just like allow us to wear hijab, which only like recently allow us to have a nikah, allow us to have a madras. Like it's people who don't want an aggressive oppression of the Islam. Because what happens, there was an aggressive oppression of Islam. So there's a group that has who has revolted against that, or not revolted, but this is not new. It's happening since the early 1900s. Arbakan, you could read about him as well. But in the past, what happened was that the Turkish military used to intervene every time. If you have a bit of memory, when you're older, the Turkish military, every time there's a too much Islam, then the Turkish military comes in there, they intervene basically. But now they've been neutralized to some degree. Um, so there is support for an Islamist party, especially in the east as well. Lots of people, especially in the rural areas as well. But often the rural areas don't determine the culture, even though they have numbers. They don't determine the culture. The urban centers determine the culture, and therefore the urban centers the Islamists have lost now. No. I think to some degree now, I don't know the detailed policies, but it appears that the discussions more on the economy and those kinds of things. That's what the AKP, Erdogan's party is not calling for an Islamist state. They're calling for a secular state where Islam is allowed to be expressed, like Cape Town. They're not calling for anything else. In fact, they have Ataturk's picture also there because they have to almost like pay homage to the idea of a secular nation. That's all they're calling for. But the secularists have their own, like for them, the hijab being unbanned at university is a problem because they're on the French secularism. So the battle is not between like Islam and Islam. It's between like French secularism and American secularism. That's where the battle is on basically. Um, yeah. No. Anyway, Allah bless and Allah increase inshallah wa ta'ala. We end there. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. We'll give you a 10-minute break inshallah till 25 past and Maulana Zakaria will join you and then Maulana Yahya comes last period inshallah.